It's time for another edition of the Daily Racing Form Weekend Preview. I am Gina Bacola alongside Alexa Zepp. Producers Lucia and Bobby helping us out this week. Alexa, we have a 3-year-old themed show. That's kind of the theme right now in horse racing, right? We're on the Triple Crown Trail. We're in just after the Derby. Everybody's kind of got that Derby and Triple Crown fever. So we'll talk about some big races this weekend that are 3-year-old themed, with the Peter Pan at Belmont at Aqueduct, with the Long Branch at Monmouth, and then a little look ahead for the Preakness. But Alexa, we want all the folks out there to follow along with us, to play along, to check out the awesome information we have, DRF.com. So you want to check out all the data, all the picks, the analysis. We've got everything you need if you're someone who's really hardcore, or if you're just sort of a novice and you're just starting and getting into their horse racing game. We've got stuff at all levels for you over at DRF.com.
Yeah, we've got everything you need. We've got lots of different cool products. We show you the Timeform US here a bunch, which has the pace projector, which is a really cool tool, especially, well, I still use it all the time, but if you're new and you're not used to really imagining how races play out, it's a really cool tool to help you.
So on this show, we're going to start out talking about Belmont at the Big A. It's the Belmont at Aqueduct meet. Since they're working on the track at Belmont Park, all the racing right now is happening over at Aqueduct, but they still run the meet that would be the Belmont meet. And one of the big races there, Alexa, is going to be this Saturday. It's the Grade 3 Peter Pan. Why this race is important: it's a stepping stone to the Belmont Stakes. The Belmont is just a month away from Saturday. It's actually going to be the Preakness coming up in just a couple weeks. So we know that it's Belmont, Preakness, all these big races for 3-year-olds. This is a race that can qualify horses to try to get into the Belmont. And for a lot of these horses, they weren't quite Kentucky Derby horses. Maybe they were just a little bit behind schedule. Maybe they weren't as precocious. Maybe they didn't have the Kentucky Derby points, but they're still talented horses in this field. You ready to meet the field for the Peter Pan?
100%.
Let's do it. Let's start with the number 1, Vossimo. So this is a 1.125 mile race at Belmont at Aqueduct. Vossimo's been an interesting horse, Alexa, because he has a ton of talent. You can see from his first 2 races, he won them both. But I think they're still trying to figure out his running style. He's a little bit quirky. Like, he's a horse who, when he gets distance from the field a little bit, like, he loses focus. I think they need to ride him aggressively. In reading some of the quotes from the trainer and the connections, he just seems like that kind of horse who, once he drops out of it, he gets a little lazy and he kind of like loses that focus. What do you think about him in this spot?
Yeah, he's a really interesting one in here. Like you're saying, I mean, he won those first 2 starts and then ran in the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby. I think those were too tough of a spot for him, but he really didn't embarrass himself completely in either. Like in the Louisiana Derby, he was wide, still passed some horses late. And in the Risen Star, he flattened out, but then kind of re-rallied. So like you're saying, there's some focus issues. Hopefully the trainer's figuring that out. He's done nothing but improve, though, with experience, and IRAD is sticking around on him. So I think he'll need to take a step forward. But Fletcher must think enough of him to put him in a tough spot like this in the Peter Pan.
One of my favorite names this weekend for a horse, Happily Delusional, is actually cross-entered in this race and in the race we're going to talk about in the next segment. They haven't really determined yet.
I feel like that's what we are during the Triple Crown, right?
I was going to say, us horse racing fans, we're definitely delusional sometimes, and happily, hopefully. But this is a horse who I had a tougher time building a win case for. He's just a deep closer. His last race wasn't a bad 4th, but he comes from so far out of it that he just kind of needs some help up front. He needs them to go really fast early on.
Yeah, he's consistent, right? But he's hit the board in 5 out of 8 starts, but this is a huge class leap, and he's never really threatened in the 2 minor stakes attempts that he's had. His trainer is 0 for 4 in graded stakes. His figures are kind of lagging behind the others in here. So, I mean, he's a trier, so I'll give him that. Maybe as a long shot underneath if the pace were to melt down, like you're saying, and he's a big closer and can come. But this is going to be a tough spot. And like you said, he's cross-centered at Monmouth, so they might have just entered him in here, see how the race shapes up, see if they think he's got a real shot, and if not, maybe they'll run him in that a little bit easier spot.
Yeah, they have some options this weekend where they want to run. Surfside Moon finished 3rd in the Federico Tessio, and you know what? He's been in pretty good form as of late. He was 2nd in the Withers. He's a horse who seems like he's moving in the right direction. What do you think about him in here?
I like him a lot. He was second, like you said, in the Withers to Captain Cook, who we'll be talking about, and is the one who got away for me when I tried to buy him in November. But he's training steadily at Fair Hill. He's shown some versatility, run on the turf and the dirt. His better speed figures have been over the dirt, but his only win actually came over the turf. But I think he could be sitting on kind of a peak effort in this third start off of the form cycle. So I'm using him.
The number 4 Hill Road has a lot of ability, but there's been like a little couple physical issues. He got sick. They were backed up in the training. And so he hasn't really been able to put a lot of races together. I also wonder if he's going to get the pace to chase in here as we look at the pace projector. I don't know how fast they're going to be going early on, but one thing Alexa, as we see in the replay, this horse will pick up some pieces and will pass some horses late.
Yeah, and he came closing in the Tampa Bay Derby, which had a very pedestrian pace. So I think you have to kind of
Upgrade
elevate
him,
him
right?
there, upgrade
Yeah.
that, because it's really hard when, so to understand pace a little more, like when a race is really, really slow, there's a big advantage to those horses who are on the early lead because they haven't exhausted themselves yet. So when you see a horse making up ground in a really slow race, you upgrade it a bit. And he has a huge time from US late pace figure of 123.
This weekend, Pat McAfee has a wrestling match against Gunther in WWE Backlash. I'm a wrestling fan, but this McAfee is actually a sibling to Torpedo Anna, the horse of the year, who we saw run just last weekend. The blinkers come on for McAfee, who's faced tough company in the Gotham and in the Wood. Do you give him a shot in here?
I think he'll need to show us something new, but he's, like you said, getting those blinkers. So I think that could really sharpen him up and be what he needs. But I've got a little bit of mixed signals from him in this race.
Uncaged is the horse who I'm really interested in, Alexa, because I liked him last year coming off of his career debut. And then he was off. He didn't race from August to March. And when he showed back up in March, he kind of ran like a horse who needed the race. He was behind a fast horse named Rolando. Then when he stretched out on April 6th, it was an awesome race at Aqueduct. We're watching it right here. And he just looked like a horse who should have no problem with extra distance. So I think he's a major player, and I'm going to give him a look in here. What do you think about Uncaged?
I don't like him as much as you do, but I am not going to throw shade at him either. His 2 wins have come in the mud. So you kind of wonder, did the surface aid him? But also making up ground in the mud isn't the easiest task either. So, if you're playing exotics, I think you can include him underneath for sure.
First pitch comes off of a win, was a 4-length winner at Aqueduct last time out. And what was nice is that was when he stretched out to 1 mile and an eighth. Do you think this guy can strike them all out?
No, I just don't think he's fast enough, and his trainer is
Agreed.
0 for 8 coming off of a win, so I'm not big on him.
I thought Captain Cook feels like the horse to beat in here. He comes off a pretty good 4th in the Wood Memorial. Those horses who finished in front of him might have just been a little bit better, like Rodriguez and Grande. He has enough speed to stay close. He might naturally be one of the quickest early in here. I just don't think this was a bad effort last time out. He just seems like a really solid fit in this race.
I agree. I think that was a better than looked effort. He's always in the action. He just tired late. His 2 wins over the surface at Aqueduct. So definitely the one to beat. You're just not going to get a lot of value on him.
And as we round things out, Brereton's Baytown comes off a 5th place finish in the Arkansas Derby. Lordship, the number 10, won't be running in this race, will be running in the Long Branch. So what do you think about the horse who rounds things out for us, Brereton's Baytown?
I really can't endorse Brereton's Baytown in this one. He's just been overmatched in all of these tougher races. So he's not for me. I love Lordship, but we'll get to him next because he's running in a different race.
It's a little bit of a tease. We're going to talk about the Long Branch after the break. But for this race, Alexa, for the Peter Pan, how are you going to stack him up here?
I'm doing Surfside Moon on top of Captain Cook. So I'm not leaving Captain Cook out of it, but I'm going to try to find a little bit of more value with the 3, which is morning line of 8-1 or plus 800.
Lots of similarities for you and I with our top selections here. We both have the 8 Captain Cook in the 2nd spot. For me, a lot of time, that's like the horse to beat spot, but not necessarily the horse I want to bet. Like I'll put the short price that I think is going to be really tough in the 2nd spot. So 6-8-1-3 for me, 3-8-4-1 for Alexa. But the important part is always you. Make sure you head to shop.drf.com to see how you're going to play the Peter Pan on Saturday at Belmont at Aqueduct. We take a quick break. When we return, we'll go to the Jersey Shore. It's time to head on over to Monmouth Park. weekend at Monmouth Park. Love racing over on the Jersey Shore. I actually had one of my favorite trips ever to Monmouth Park a few years back, and they have some big racing, Alexa, as one of the biggest races of the year at Monmouth is the Haskell, and that goes in a couple months. So they have a series of races that actually leads you into the Haskell, and it starts on Saturday right here, race number 9 with the Long Branch. It's a 1.70 mile race, and it begins with Cool Intention. So it's not necessarily like a points race. You don't get points to qualify. This is just kind of a stepping stone race where horses who running here hope they run well. And then a month from now, they'll be running in what is the Pegasus race up at Monmouth Park. That's the next prep. Then they get into the Haskell. So we'll start things out with Cool Intentions. He was a good horse early on in his career, his first few races. I remember really liking him going into the Mucho Macho Man race. He was only 7-2 there. He just didn't really fire that day, Alexa. The race didn't set up for him. It was won by a lone speed horse. And then he came back in the Florida Derby, and Cool Intentions was probably just overmatched that day. I mean, look who was second in the Florida Derby. Sovereignty. We had Tapan Street, who would have been one of the major players in the Kentucky Derby had he not gotten scratched. This just feels like a way better spot for Cool Intentions, kind of like a starting over spot.
Yeah, he was really thrown in the deep end in the Florida Derby and was just never involved. This is the first time out of Florida, but I really think this drop in class is going to help. He's got, 2 strong winds going over a little bit of a shorter distance. So I think this distance is a little bit of a question for him. The rail draw might not be the best spot for him. I think it's a fair bet, but not super thrilling with the odds that we're given at, plus 350. So
Yeah.
I'm like very lukewarm on Cool Intentions.
I kind of agree. Kind of mixed feelings. I'm going back and forth a little bit. Dear Chairman, we have a replay of Dear Chairman absolutely crushed a field last time out. Now, he beat New York bred runners, and this is going to be facing open company runners, but he was really impressive on the front end here. So I kind of assume that they're going to try to do the same thing. Like, I'm expecting them to try to be forwardly placed with him again in this race.
Yeah, so Gino mentioned the beating New York bred. So every state has their own racing program, and you're incentivized to breed in that state and then run in that state. You're eligible for more money if you're running in these state bred races. But naturally, if it's a limited field to
Smaller
just
pool,
versus
right?
someone state, it's not going to be necessarily as tough of a competition as open company where anybody can enter it. So we talk a lot about, class drops, class rises, and that's one thing that's a factor in that. So like you said, he beat them impressively. This is open company. I'm concerned about him getting caught in a pace war, though. That's what I'm concerned about. And I think it'll be hard for him to hold off the closers.
I don't think he's as fast as some of the others. That's the problem. Like, he wants to be on the lead, but he's not quite as quick as some others in here. I feel like Lordship should be running in the races with Take Charge, My Lady. So we could go lords and ladies back and forth right there. Lordship will be running in the Long Branch this weekend, Alexa. And I know you like this horse a little bit.
I do. He was cross-centered in the Peter Pan, like we mentioned earlier. In that race, I think he would have been a real wild card. He debuted going 2 turns at Tampa, and that was a softer field, but he won with a pretty eye-catching move. We have the replay here for you. His figures weren't huge, but he is bred to run all day. He's by Gun Runner out of a Giants Causeway mare. He's trained by Chad Brown. So I think the Peter Pan would have been a big test for him, but this is a much more logical step up. And if the pace melts down, which I think is very likely with the speed that we have, he might pounce. So he's a big player. He's actually my top pick.
I think he makes a way better fit in this spot too. Completely agree. I don't have any knocks on him. He's actually a sibling to a horse named Hall of Fame, who's a grade 3 winner. We just saw Hall of Fame run a pretty good third last weekend at Churchill Downs. Baby Dukes looks like speed to me. Alexa, he finished behind a horse named Pay Billy, who's actually going to be running in the Preakness next weekend. What do you think about Baby Dukes?
Yeah, like you said, he's going to want to go out early. That makes him a little bit vulnerable in here. He's either first or second at the first call in pretty much all of his races. So I think he can hang around, but I do think he needs the perfect trip.
And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's the horse that we talked about in the previous segment, Happily Delusional. He is a stone cold closer. So while Baby Dukes is going to be towards the front, you see that number 5, that Chicklet, way towards the back. That's where he's going to be settled early on.
Yeah, this would be a much more comfortable spot for him if he chooses to run in here. So if he shows up Saturday, could be an upset with him coming at the end.
Harrigan, I had a tougher time making a case for. He won his first 2 races easily. They were over at Parks, in Pennsylvania. The track there, it's just a little bit softer competition, and then when he stepped up and faced better, he was kind of overmatched. I need to see one from him against a group like this before I really know how good he is.
I completely agree. He just kind of folded and was one of the favorites last week in an easier spot, and or not last week, last race. That's just not the effort you want to see from a win
No.
candidate stepping up. So, like you said, he's won nicely twice, but a much easier level. I'm gonna wait off and see it if he shows us something special this time.
I think the 7 Kentucky Outlaw is a little bit interesting, and maybe it's because I bet this horse last time, Alexa, right? And when you bet a horse, usually you're like focused on that horse the whole time because you're watching what happens. And right out of the starting gate, Kentucky Outlaw missed the break. And in both of his first 2 races, he had been right on the lead. So all of a sudden, it's a completely different dynamic from him. He's not used to being behind horses. He ends up having to move really wide, and it doesn't even really show it if you're just looking at the running line. He moved all the way up to like within a length of the field, and then he just got tired. He made his move too early. He had to make his
Mhm.
move wide. I think he's a lot better than that race. Mainly, I just expect them to show more speed with him in here. What do you think about Kentucky Outlaw?
I completely agree. Horses, if not all horses, we talk about versatile horses who can handle any setup or whatever happens, but I think he's one who needs a lead and he blew the start. Like you said, they're also giving him blinkers today. So that should help, sharpen his speed, give him that focus, hopefully have a really clean break. And his workouts are so quick. So I think he's really dangerous in here.
Rounding out the field is Pascaline. He feels like one of the horses to beat, right? He hasn't really done anything wrong in his 3 races. He was 3rd in the Bayshore. That was his first start in 7 months. I think he's going to improve off of that race.
Yeah, I mean, he's improved so much every single race. 16 speed points every start, which is like a massive improvement. So we'll see if he continues that, but he's a very valid favorite. Again, just a favorite, so not a ton of value.
Rounding out the field here, let's take a look at selections for this one. Alexa, you're going to put the 3 on top. Lots of similarities for us with the 2 of them. 3, 7, 8, 5 for Alexa. For me, 7, 8, 1, 3. Whoever you play, however you play them, we wish you the best of luck in the long branch, but don't go anywhere. We're going to recap the Kentucky Derby from last week, and we're going to take a look ahead at next week's field for the Preakness. Kentucky Derby 2025 is in the books. And Alexa, it's a really good Saturday last week. It just felt like a really satisfying result overall because you had the Hall of Fame trainer, Belmont, who has been such a mainstay and just such a well-respected trainer in the game. You had a jockey who has been his longtime rider. They've been so loyal to each other. They team up. You have an ownership group who has put so much money into the game and had an incredible weekend, winning the Kentucky Oaks, winning the Kentucky Derby, big races overseas. It just felt like a really satisfying result for a team that deserved winning the Kentucky Derby, and credit to Sovereignty and all the connections there.
Yeah, I mean, it really was exciting. Junior had a injury, like a month and a half ago, I think, and didn't ride him in his last race, and was trying to heal and get good for the Derby, and clearly he did. So it was a great result, a great day. Obviously, it rained, so a little bit of a soggy day, but a great Derby.
And you got the chance to even talk with some of the team of Sovereignty before the race. You were doing some reporting and getting videos and footage and everything for us. And what,
That was a lucky interview. I
right?
picked the right
Yeah.
ownership group to interview ahead of time. So they were so excited. Obviously, Godolphin's been around a long time, but they had some new owners, first time at the Derby, first time with a horse. It was great.
And it was a very logical result, right? Well, sometimes the Derby things can get crazy. It can be 20 horse field. It's pouring rain. You have horses that maybe aren't the best horse that kind of gets a good trip and wins. It felt like 3 of the best, if not the 3 best. I think you probably want to include Sandman and like Tapan Street in like the top 5. But these 3 horses have been very good, really from the get go.
Yeah, they're all great. I ended up fading Sovereignty just from a value standpoint, but he ended up going off at 7-1. You see the payouts on the screen there. So, there's always value at the Derby because it's so competitive. But Journalism was a favorite, getting second. Baeza is the horse that drew in at the last minute. And I'm really excited about, because we've talked about the pedigree implications there, because his mom gave birth to the 2023 Kentucky Derby winner, 2024 Kentucky Derby contender, and Belmont winner. So that's just an exciting storyline to follow going forward in racing. So yeah, all around successful Derby.
What we do see, though, is because the Preakness is such a short turnaround, when we look at the order of finish from the Kentucky Derby, a lot of these horses don't run back in the Preakness. They wait, and now they'll run back in the Belmont, so they get that 5 weeks in between starts. So right now, it only looks like, I think, Journalism and American Promise of the horses who ran in the Kentucky Derby are even coming back, because we got the unfortunate news, Alexa, that Sovereignty is going to skip the Preakness. You can always find all the horse racing news you need at DRF.com. All the headlines, all the major news. You will stay updated on everything at DRF.com. We had the article here from Dave Grenning talking about Sovereignty skipping the Preakness, pointing to the Belmont, and he's already arrived at Saratoga. This isn't a physical injury thing.
Yeah.
They just want more spacing, more time for the horse. They think it will be better for their horse, and it will give him a longer career and help him run races next year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we want the chance to have a Triple Crown runner, a Triple Crown winner. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for your horse. And if their horse needs a little more time between races, and that's what they're comfortable with for setting him up for success and not retiring him. I mean, this is a Godolphin, so they don't necessarily need to retire him for stud. He can, have a really long career in future years. So I think they're thinking long term, and I respect that.
Belmont, as a trainer, he just doesn't bring horses back quickly. If you look at his statistics and his record in doing that, it hasn't been successful. So if you as a trainer aren't very good at that, and you think your horse might need time, they're doing right by the horse. And this is the group of horses that looks to be lining up in the Preakness next Saturday. As of now, we actually had one new addition to this group, Alexa, I think just came in on Thursday. Looks like Goal Oriented for Bob Baffert will run. So Bob Baffert should have 2 runners in the Preakness. But if Journalism ends up running in this race, he will likely be a heavy, heavy favorite in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting though. Baffert has 2. He's won the Preakness 8 times. He'll have Rodriguez, who scratched out of the Derby, and the undefeated new runner Goal Oriented, like you said. So Journalism favorite American Promise, who had a bad Derby trip, 16th place, is going to be entering for Dwayne Lucas, who won last year with Cecil Gray, became the oldest trainer ever to win a Triple Crown race at 89 years old.
He's the opposite of Belmont. As patient as Belmont is, Dwayne Lucas, he's just going to run his horses every couple of weeks as often as they can.
Yeah. And River Thames, maybe in the field, who finished second behind
Sovereignty.
Right? Yeah, so that's one who probably take money, because he goes really close to the Derby winner in a race.
If you use Sovereignty as kind of a measuring stick, River Thames was right there with him. So we are done for this week, but next week we're going to have a big Preakness preview show for you. So make sure to look around, because that show will be on a couple times through the week, and we love chatting with you here on SportsGrid.